Board games, board games, board games. I might be talking about the action cube, but I'm not gonna shout. I'm talking about the action cube, and that is something that you can use in your game to add chaos to it. Robo Rally became quite a hit, and so did others using this tool. Action queue and board games, that's what I'm talking about, you fool. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. It is time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether. It's 10 a.m. ish UK time, which is always the time that we do that. So yeah, what is going on? Um, this is another episode in my Pondering Mechanisms, and thanks to this book, Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design by Geoff Engelstein and Isaac Shalev, and thanks to them for basically overhauling the all the mechanisms on Board Game Geek. And whilst again there's a lot of mechanisms that I would like to see here, I do think that party games, dexterity games are kind of underrepresented. It is mainly kind of Euro American style stuff. It is basically focused on the kind of stuff that is popular on Board Game Geek. But having said that, I feel like having a thorough look at all these mechanisms so that I can better understand them will be good for me, and hopefully it will be good and interesting for you. Hello, Timmy, and I hope that you're well. And so, as mentioned, we are talking about the fourth mechanism on this very long list. We are still at number 4, so action cue. Let's take a quick break before we get to that and quickly talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. So what have you been up to? What have I been up to? Honestly, yesterday I didn't do an awful lot. I was on social media. I asked people to vote on some of their favourite creatures. I've been spending a bit too long on the internet. I've not managed to get out. But this morning I did finally get out. I did have a walk around the block, which is a tiny thing. But honestly, like, I've just been feeling a bit down. So that was a bit of an achievement for me. Yeah, that was it. Other than that, what else can I say? I cooked some potatoes. I broke my diet again. I had bits of cereal and stuff in the evening. I'm going to the potatoes, but I'm going to see how I get on. Hello, Yoda. It is lovely to see you. What are some of your recent highlights? And let me move on to the topic and talk about action cues and why I, even though I'm not an expert in them, why I think they're a brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? So I think that the action cue, what it's really good at, is giving you a sense of chaos, but with a feeling of control, if that makes sense. And let me just turn on this light. I didn't realize quite how dark I was. I do apologize. So, yeah, there's once you reveal all the actions, there's chaos, but then you get this moment of planning, and it's, oh, what's going to happen? And I think that that sense is the brilliant thing here. Yoda, yeah, I saw on, I want to say, yeah, Twitter. I saw your pyramid on Twitter. It looked fantastic. Congratulations on your Lego pyramid. And it looks like you had a great stream. So, have you played any action cue games, like Robo Rally being the best known one? Do you enjoy them? Let me know what you think. Feel free to give your own input, comment, ask questions, like, follow, all that usual stuff as we get on. So, how did Geoff Engelstein and Isaac Shalev define this mechanism? The description is, players create action cues and perform them in sequence. So, action cues, you are determining ahead of time that there's some actions. You've got at least 2 actions, like multiple actions. Like, it can't be a cue if it's just one. And then you put them in order and then you execute them. On Board Game Geek, it actually expands on this. In Board Game Geek, it goes on to say, cues can either be batch cues, where all actions are executed in sequence, or rolling cues, where actions are added to the end of the queue, and the first action is then executed. Players may each have their own queue of actions, or there may be a shared action queue. And the shared action queue is kind of gets into the sort of worker placement, action drafting system quite often. Nuclear War is an example of a rolling queue. Colt Express is an example of a batch queue. Impulse utilizes a shared rolling queue. Some games utilize a fixed action queue printed on the board, such as Bus and Dominant Species. An action queue that is only for movement actions is called programmed movements, which has a separate entry. There's 2,190 games in this entry, which means that it's fairly popular, but it's not the most popular thing on Board Game Geek. And as you can tell by the fact that I've not even looked at Impulse properly yet, I possibly not spent enough time researching this. I will come back to all of these things, and I do apologize. But we'll go through some examples first. Hello, Sate. It is lovely to see you. Yes, look at you making it more than once in a row. It is an absolute delight to see you. And we are talking about action cues. Have you played Robo Rally? Have you played any of these games? I mean, my favorite one of them all is Root. Like the birds. I love being the birds, which is where the action cue is. But yeah, let me know. Dutch Yoda says, according to Board Game Geek, I've played a bunch. Robinson Crusoe is my favorite. Gloomhaven, Mechs vs. Minions, Root, Colt Express, Libertalia, and so forth. So let's look at some examples. So there's a whole bunch of things, and I thought, let's look at one that I'm super familiar with. This is the Eyrie. In Root, if you don't know, all of the factions are completely different, and only if you're playing this particular faction, one of 4 in the basic game, is there an action queue. No other player will be interacting with your action queue, but they can see the action queue. Now, in Root, the way it works is you can, if you are the Eyrie, you can do different things. You can recruit, which means that you add troops. You can move, which means you move the troops. You can do battle, which means you roll the dice, and hopefully you've got more troops than them, and then their troops die. And you can build, which is also kind of how you win the game, by building your roosts. But here's the twist. Once you've done a thing, you need to do it every single turn afterwards. So once you say, yes, I am going to build, that means that you need to build every single turn thereafter. This isn't really a batch queue in the normal sense, that you don't make a batch and then do it all at once. No. Neither is this a rolling queue where you do one thing. No, this is more of a kind of incremental, built up over multiple turns programming. And this is really fascinating. So interestingly, because only one person is doing the programming, it gets rid of a lot of the chaos, because typically with programming games, everyone will program. And I guess I should, let me talk about Robo Rally next. But typically in programming, there's that shared moment of revelation and chaos, which doesn't happen in this game. In this game, if you mess up, it's all your fault. And then other players get their turns. But here's the thing, because every turn I can't take away action. So I start off with recruit and battle. That means every turn I have to battle 100%. Once I say I build, I need to find a new place to build, and I can only build once in each place. So then I need to venture out and keep exploring, keep dominating, because I can't build unless I'm dominating. And so it gives this sense of tension. It gives this sense of commitment. And then everyone else sees your queue and can mess it up, which is a really interesting, possibly unique implementation of the action queue mechanism. Root, fantastic. Xate says, I also prefer the birds in Root. And Dutch Yoda says, when I heard about the decree, I thought it would never work, but I've won more with the Irie than any other faction. Yes, if you can ever do any, if you can't do something, then they go into turmoil. And it doesn't mean you lose, you just lose a bunch of points and then you start off from zero. But it's got this incremental building, and it's just fantastic. Let's look at probably the typical one, which is Robo Rally, a fantastic game. So this is I think it might be Richard Garfield's first designed game which has been published, as far as I know. So this is what they were originally pitching before they went on to make Magic the Gathering, Robo Rally. A bunch of robots are moving around on the central board, and then you put down cards to say what you want your robot to do. It can do, as you see there, a U-turn, rotate, you move forwards, and there's faster move forwards. And the twist here is that everyone programs at the same time. Then there's a bit of real-time element to it because you don't want people to be spending too long. No, it's not that kind of game. It's a high chaos game. Everyone programs at the same time. Then everyone reveals at the same time. And then basically everyone performs their moves simultaneously. So the position of other players influences you, because if someone's there in front of you, then instead of moving to where you want to go, they will get into your way and you're like, oh, why are you in my way? I need to knock you. And then that's where the chaos comes in, the simultaneous revelation. So it's almost like action queue is quite commonly combined with simultaneous reveals. And I think that this really plays into the chaotic heart of what action queues can be. And yeah, if you've not played this, then absolutely check it out. Space Alert, another real-time game, this time cooperative. There's a CD that you listen to, and you're listening to all the instructions, and then you need to play cards. Everyone's doing their own thing, and then they need to move around and interact with stuff, and you need to make sure that everyone's doing stuff, but then you need to collaborate even though you're not managing to see everyone. And then again, after the real-time frantic planning, you've got the, okay, now let's reveal. Now let's see if we actually manage to overcome the obstacles. And so I think that, again, it seems like action queues go really well with this sense of real-time action. But here we come to Dungeon Lords, a game that I've really enjoyed. And this is what's called a shared batch queue. So rather than each player doing their own things, you can actually block stuff. So it's kind of like action queue combined with worker placement. And really, a lot of worker placements kind of lean into this. And this kind of doesn't really feel the same. It kind of, by putting it all out into the open, it forgoes the sense of chaos and levity and hilarity that you might find from something like Robo Rally or Space Alert. But at the same time, the action queue pushes into the sense of planning and forward planning and what do I want to do here. You will have different actions. You don't get to do all the things. Once someone's prioritized, okay, I'm going to be the first person to do this, or I'm going to be the last person, but then I get to certain benefits, and then you execute all of them in order. which is a system that's been used in a lot of other worker placement style games. And then, of course, Cult Express, which I think works really well, where, yes, it's essentially a two-dimensional playing field. I mean, it is three-dimensional, that you've got the three-dimensional sculpture and you've got but it's basically two lines next to each other. You've got like this movement and then the movement up on top, and it's simplified. The cards are, okay, move up or down, move along the carriages, shoot, like all, you're ransacking, you're trying to avoid getting shot, you're trying to avoid bad things happening to you. It's high stakes. And I think that, again, it's kind of resonant of the chaos of a gunfight and like, what's going on? And so, yeah, these are all games that I've enjoyed. So, yeah, what do you think is your favorite action drafting game? I mean, sorry, action queuing game. I do apologize. And we move on to, how does it impact a game? How will it affect the experience at the table? And Sate says, we played Cult Express on Sunday with 3 Ukrainians, one a child, Judith, and me. 2 of them only spoke Ukrainian, so the explanation was with translation, but after that we could all play and laugh. I think this is just kind of, yeah, the joy of a relatively simple game. I mean, you don't get much simpler than Cult Express when you talk about action drafting. And, you know, the joy of symbology. I mean, yeah, that dollar sign clearly is something to do with money. That's clearly a gun over there. That's clearly something to do with movement. And so, yeah, it's done really, really nicely. I think that action drafting has 2 impacts. Firstly, it means that, we've already discussed, it means that you've got to plan ahead. And it means that when you reveal all the things, there might be a few surprises. And during the actual execution, it's essentially, unlike other games where you only need to make that decision at the time, it's kind of pushing forward the decision of what exactly do I want to do, but then it's offsetting the decision of how exactly do I want to do this. Now, quite often with action queue games, there might be a decision to be made, like, do you want to go this way or that way? Sometimes in Cult Express, you get the option of like 2 different directions. I mean, you might have had a plan, but then in the heat of the moment, you might choose to go somewhere else. And then, whereas sometimes they are very specific and it's all about the planning, you need to do this. So it's kind of like chunking your decisions. And hello, Ian, it is lovely to see you. I think that it makes the experience at the table more staccato, whereas a normal game experience, okay, I do a thing, everyone. Okay, I do a thing. Okay, I do a thing. I do a thing. And that's fine. Like, I'm not Ticket to Ride. It's a fine game. Like, Ticket to Ride London is probably a game that I might take with me even when I emigrate. But there's something joyful to be said about that. Oh, I've got to do a lot of thinking. We get to have fun and laugh as all this chaos happens. Oh, I've got to do, you know, there's that punctuation, there's those cycles. And even though some big games are like all about the phases, okay, you do the buying phase, then you do the market phase, and everyone does the market, then everyone does the selling and so forth. But I think that with action queues, it's super intuitive. You don't have to say, okay, what's the next phase? Because it's like, play all your cards, do all your cards. play all your cards, do all your cards. Like it's simple. And so yes, this wouldn't would it work in a party game? I don't think it would. Yeah, like that's the next question. Like, how versatile is it? I don't think it. I can't see it. Imagine it working well with like a party game or mass market game. It feels like depends what you mean by mass market, but there has to be a certain level of complexity. There has to be a certain level of interaction from other people. There has to be a certain reason why you might want to do this now, but then you're not sure if you would want to do it after everyone else has done their first thing. There needs to be that level of unknown. Otherwise, you might as well be doing it asynchronously. I mean, the whole point of action queues is that you make all the action queues and then you resolve them all. That is kind of fundamental to it. And so, but beyond that, I think that it would actually work in a lot more games than it's currently in. I think that I would love to see more action queue games. I think that anyone who doesn't mind a bit of planning, I mean, hopefully you're not one of these people who gets analysis paralysis when you're playing Colt Express and then has to ponder for like 1 or 2 minutes about, oh, what's everyone else going to do? If everyone else is doing the same thing at the table, then fine. But I think it's got to be people who, I think the people who would really enjoy it are people who want a strong sense of agency, because it's not like you're and wants the chaos to not be from the cards, not from the dice, but from the other players. And I think that's the key thing, that the chaos is from the other players. And I love that. I love it when it's all about us at the table. The chaos isn't from rolling a die and seeing, did I get a critical 1 or a critical 20 or did I roll to hit? You know what I mean? Like the chaos is, I did this thing, but then you did a thing that I wasn't expecting. And so it works really well for games with a certain level of interaction on a central board, I would say. If it doesn't have interaction on the central board, then at least interaction like Dungeon Lords in the sense that you might be denying people something, or in that your desires are a bit vague and uncertain because there's so much going on. And also here, because the heroes go into different places and you're not sure what other people are going to do, and then there's a market at the end. That kind of feeds into the whole thing. So I think there needs to be a certain level of interaction, and anyone who loves interaction and loves a bit of chaos. Yeah, Libertalia was on the list there. We go to, I think that was fairly Libertalia. I'm wondering why. Yeah, is the new one re-implemented by Libertalia? Okay, like they'll both be, the action queue system, absolutely, 100%. And yeah, maybe is that your favorite action queue game? When is it bad? What issues might there be? I think that there has to be a certain level of denial, a certain level of, haha, I'm getting in your way, a certain level of conflict. And even though Libertalia is really on the low end of this conflict, I think that if you're someone who just doesn't ever want your plan to be ruined by someone else doing things, then this system probably isn't for you. Like this mechanism probably isn't for you. Like you have to be aware that and Ian says, yeah, I do like a good Pirates game. They are quite good sometimes. Yes, they are. Anyway, in all seriousness, you need to think about, do I actually have enough agency, enough cards, enough options in my hand at my disposal to then put together enough of a variety of different things? Because let's imagine that you're putting down 3 things. And let's assume then that the order actually matters. Okay, that's fine. Well, you could have 3 things, but you need to make sure the order matters. You need to make sure that there's enough stuff so that if you want to move, that you are able to do that. You need to have enough cards at your hand. You need to be able to have enough stuff so that it's not super overwhelming. You need to maybe make sure that the limitation on what things you have is a feature rather than a bug. Yeah, it's not the simplest thing. You might want to make sure that, okay, this little up arrow, okay, this is going to actually, some ways that you can do it is by having one single up arrow and then it's on a square tile, and then you rotate that based on which direction you want the marker or your character to go in. And so you could be saying, okay, when I'm pre-programming this, I am making that decision. That's basically it. You just need to make sure that either people have enough options, or the options and the limitation of options is a feature rather than a bug. Are there any other issues that you can think of? Please let me know. And the final question, have I used it in any of my games? No, I have not used it in any of my published games, but then I had an idea the other day. I can't remember when it was. Maybe Tuesday. I had an idea that I might prototype for tomorrow. So my idea is polyanomals, and I think it might have been back when I was talking about action points. And I was thinking, oh, what if you had action points? And I was talking on Twitter because Isaac Shalev was saying, yeah, the maths is probably generally not required. You don't need to have action points that are worth different amounts. But then what you could do is, what if it's like the actions that are worth more are physically bigger, and then you're fitting them into a thing? That would be interesting. And so what if you've got a 2x3 grid, and then you're putting polyanomals, so maybe like the attack is like a 2x2 tile, and then the rushing around is like a little T thing, and you've got like move where you've got to, and like little 1x1 tiles which generally are moved, but then sometimes people chuck another 1x1 tiles which are just there to annoy you and add time. And so it would be kind of like real-time building up your action queue, and then once you've done that on your own little board, then you move them around and battle, kind of inspired by Robo Rally and all these other games, but very much its own thing. Yes, I've actually been thinking about how I would construct this. How would I cut out things that are thick enough? Because I can't just make it out of cereal boxes, or can I? Or maybe I can make it out of marginally thicker boxes. That might be okay. But anyway, the point is, yes, I think it's a delightful mechanism and I would love to use it. So that's pretty much the end of all my chats about action queues. Beztris. Well, I guess there's like polyanomals, but it's on a 2x3 grid. It's really not about the polynomial thing. It's just kind of a incidental. Yes, there are polynomials, but you won't. Someone seeking complicated polynomials will be disappointed. It's really just there to fit things together and make the sticking to things together a bit faster and simpler. But yeah, let's move on to the. If you've got any questions or any comments about action queues, then please let me know. Otherwise, question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Oh, and I wish I'd mentioned nuclear war. Actually, you know what? I'm going to mention nuclear war just now because I looked at it the other day, and it's a fascinating game. I read through the reviews and the card lists and the strategy guides, and what happens here is that there's a time of peace and then there's a time of war, and everyone is placing these cards down. Um, Everyone is placing these cards down and planning a few turns in advance, flipping over the first. It's a rolling action queue, so it's first in, first out, but then a delay. So you're thinking, oh, are they going to go into wartime? Do I need to start bombing them? Do I need to prepare for war? When do I need to prepare for war? And it's got this building of tension, and so the rolling action queue actually works really well. And so you might want to continue playing peacetime stuff because that might be good for you, or you might be like, okay, now I'm going to go to war. And yeah, I just felt like this thematically works real well. My question is, how do you feel about games where you're fighting and there's a bit conflict? I mean, like literally fighting, like games that are themed around, fighting on a central board, whether that's fighting an enemy like Gloomhaven or, fighting like players versus players, like just fighting. Like, are there too many games with violence? Like, not that sounds wrong. Do we need more games that aren't about violence, I guess? Like, is it wrong for me to make another game which is like a brawler and people fighting together? Like, are there themes that like what do you think about violence in board games is generally basically what I'm asking. And I say this aware that there's like loads of war games and people play that for historical recreations or to study things, but then I'm not saying that simulation even begets violence, but I do wonder sometimes if there is a glorification in films and everything and like media and comics. So yeah, what do you think about fighting and dungeon crawling and that simple, okay, we are good, we want to hit each other and we want to knock out the other person? Is there too much of that? Let me know. I'm I'm really not sure is the best way that I can answer that question. I I feel like I would probably feel okay with it, but yeah, it is something that is on my mind that if something can be a different theme, then great. Um, yeah, I do feel like it does offer a simplicity. Like it's like okay, you're a bunch of people fighting to the death, or you're robots fighting to the death, or you're wizards fighting until someone has to run away, and like you don't die, but it's basically exactly the same. Ian says cartoon violence versus gory violence is very different. And that's a fair point. And most, I guess there would be almost realistic violence. We could separate it into a third category. Realistic violence would be the historical simulations. Cartoon violence would be the ones where, like, frankly, Magic the Gathering or Mechs versus Minions, or frankly, I would say Gloomhaven is kind of between cartoon and but like it feels like more on the cartoon side where it's not like it's just okay, here's a bunch of things and we're really thinking about the numbers and it's just for and then what games would you say that are about the gore violence? Would you say hate? I mean, I can't think of any really. I mean, yeah, I'm struggling there. But yeah, let me know if you have any other thoughts about it. So at this point, as always, over to you. What are you up to? You can share button if you want to. So what are you up to after this? The things that, is there something that you need to do? Is there something that you would like to do? Is there something that you think, hey, in theory, I don't need to do it, but I know that I would benefit from it, so I'm going to say I need to do it because it's a need for me. It's a need for me to be happy, and that's okay. It's not a need for other people, but it's a need for you. What do you? So I'm going to definitely cook some potatoes. I'm going to possibly cycle over to Lidl if I can summon the energy and get some more vitamin pills. I'm definitely going to try to get out by before 12 o'clock, no matter what. I have to post stuff today, otherwise a lot of money gets wasted. Like technically Chris could get the money back, but yes, stuff has to be posted today. And yeah, I would like to go dancing tonight. So there's not loads of, and yeah, before tomorrow, before 9 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to try and make one or two more prototypes. A prototype for selecting 7 cards, searching for synergies speedily, and maybe the Polyonimo game that I just mentioned, but we'll see. Is there anything that you want to share? If you do, I promise that I care. Ian might go to Settlers. Ah, you're going to Hamilton. Yeah, I've seen Hamilton and it's not like the best place. And, I remember when there was all this talk about, oh, Hamilton, you need to go to the theatre to see it. And it's like, look, I know that Hamilton, the place, and Hamilton, the person, and yeah, but yeah, I just found it kind of funny how I could say, oh, yeah, I've got tickets to Hamilton. They cost me £2 from Glasgow. But yeah, lovely person, Shaz. Settlers. So as we recap and wrap up before we finish up, so yeah, action cues. It gives you tension. It gives you chaos from the other players because there's that moment of interaction and you don't know what they're going to do. It's kind of like simultaneous reveals. Like, well, it is a subset of simultaneous reveals. And then we've got that tension that's building up in Nuclear War, the game from the 50s. We've got we've got Root where it's all about the tension of you messing up yourself because this is a batch queue, but then you keep adding to the batch queue because you don't start from fresh, which is a really interesting innovation. If you know any other games that where you keep building to the same action queue, then I'd love to hear about it. Robo Rally, just it kind of seems to summarize. This seems to be like the archetypal action queue game. Everyone does the things, and then we all interact, and we all laugh at how hilarious it is. You can cooperate. You can, grab resources and deny other people resources, and then do all the things, and then end up in a maybe take something that someone wasn't quite expecting. And Colt Express, it's just a lovely game where you're thinking about what other people will do. And then there's the added, yes, we do it one at a time. And then the gunfighting. I mean, the gunfighting in Colt Express, I'm just going to put it out there, is a lot more dramatic than Robo Rally. I almost feel like Richard Garfield, I mean, is a brilliant designer, right? And Colt Express probably wouldn't exist without Robo Rally, but I'm almost going to say that Colt Express is like a modern, improved version of Robo Rally. I know they are very different, and I could imagine people wanting both in their collection, but for me, they feel similar enough, and I would always prefer to play Colt Express, and that's just me. But yeah, that's my recap. And If you've enjoyed this, then please check me out in all the places. stuffbybez.bigcartel.com. I need to update that shop. I will do that in the next week. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube. I am Stuff by Bez. Facebook, search for Stuff by Bez, but it's actually facebook.com/thingsbybez. If you go to stuffbybez.com/discord, then you can go there. Also, I should actually add on, if you go to stuffbybez.com/contest, and then you can check out the LDEC game design contest. If you go to stuffbybez.com/arts contest, you will see the illustration and typography contest. And please enter those before the end of the month. But most importantly, if you want to support me and follow One Thing, then please check out my next Kickstarter, which is going to be for cute comical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes noises. For now, look, if you want to check out my streams, then go there and spread the word. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a delight. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Bye-bye. And that's all I've got to say. Hello. Lovely to see you. And bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a lovely day.